Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cloud Optimization Masterclass. Today, businesses, as you know, are gearing towards digital maturity, and they are using the full breadth of cloud to drive efficiency and also customer satisfaction, which results in growth. But the caveat includes managing scalability and also adapting rapidly to market changes. Therefore, optimizing cloud infrastructure becomes essential. A well-optimized cloud infrastructure directly improves customer experience by ensuring faster load times, higher availability, and seamless interactions. In today's session, we will unpack three important pillars which ultimately lead to business growth and innovation in a competitive landscape, which are FinOps, CloudOps, SecOps. We will unpack strategies, priorities, and objectives around it. Joining me for the conversation today are esteemed IT leaders of this country. Please welcome Gaurav Kushwaha, CDIO, Jubilant Ingreva Limited; Gauri Shankar Matapatti, CIO, Butterfly Appliance Limited; Vijay Purohit, CIO, APAC and Head of Global Digital Hub for Holcim; Vinod Shivaramakrishnan, CDIO of SR; Harshad Parulekar, VP Cloud Engineering at HDFC Life; and Rajesh Avasthi, Vice President and Business Head of Tata Communications Limited. Welcome, gentlemen. I'm glad to have you on board for this session.
Thank you.
Before we move to the panel, here's an interesting poll question. How does your organization currently manage and monitor cloud costs? Heading towards panel and the most awaited conversation of the day, we will discuss strategies. We will see how the role of FinOps is evolving. We will see how teams across organizations can collaborate. So my first question is, what strategies can organizations employ to achieve greater transparency and control over their cloud costs? Vinod, would you like to answer this?
Sure. I think first of all, quite a privilege to be on this session. So thank you for inviting me. I think, the key with optimization and transparency is really the unit of measure of utilization, which I think cannot be anything bigger than the workload level. I think if you understand at a workload level what you're using and have that, because one of the premises on which cloud is based is really and is sold is that anybody can spin up anything. But the challenge with that is really that you lose sight in that overall of individual workload. And eventually, I think transparency and tracking and utilization comes from the knowledge of every individual workload against the application or against the area in which you're using. And I think anything higher than that level tends to lead to challenges. One of the good things about this is that if you look at it at a workload level and you find unexplained usage, at least our strategy, and Gaurav and I were in the same organization for a while, was to turn these workloads off and see who complains. So I think that is really the only way in which you can keep this from growing in unexplained contexts. Of course, the last thing I'd like to mention is you need to have periodic reviews, because one of the challenges, again, when you have a multiplicity of users within IT, is one owner for spinning these off. We used to do, I think, monthly reviews to say, okay, this is the bill, this is the workload. How do we reconcile these two, and how do we understand what is going on that we don't understand? So that's generally at least my 2 cents on how.
Periodic checks and balances. Yes, we have noted. Gary, what strategies do you employ to achieve transparency?
Hi, good afternoon all, and thanks for having me on the panel discussion. See, in today's landscape, right, the cloud plays a very critical or central role to driving the digital transformation within the organization.
True.
It can expedite, we know that innovation, boost efficiency, and also enhance the customer services. See, it is also important to understand the cloud service model is not easy, right? But companies can achieve the transparency and also take the control on the cost. They need to form the team, right, who can track and monitor and optimize the cloud spending. There are also tools are available which can monitor the cost so that real-time visibility to cost spending, and do regular audit, as like this saying on that. So do regular audit to identify unused or underutilized resources and eliminate the waste wherever it's possible on that, and do tagging and cost allocation based on the projects, or like a IT initiative. which can give the clear spending pattern where you're spending money for which project. And and there are also some budget alerts are available, in the solution, which can, to avoid the unexpected cost spikes when it required. And wherever it's possible, optimize the resource uses, right? And continually review, as we know said that, adjust resource utilization to prevent the over provisioning also. And there are also facilities there where you can do automate scaling and shutdown for a non-required like resources to reduce the cost, right? It's like a few of the applications where you don't need a live DR there. You can shut down and you get, suppose if it's a 1 hour is okay, you can shut down that DR from the time when you don't need to be up for a live in that. I think these are the steps which will help you to not only like a transparency, but also the control the overall the cloud cost.
Understood. So there needs to be a team to monitor this.
See, the team which is there, to monitor, definitely people has to be from IT, and also your the cloud provider has to be part of it, and maybe you can have a person from the finance side. So, but there has to be a team who can monitor regularly on this.
Yes.
Like cross functionality, that is more important.
It's more of a shared responsibility model.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Vijay, what's your take on it?
Hey, thanks, Vaishnavi, for having me here. I think it's a very interesting and running topic in all the organizations. Especially like the way we know that Gary summarized it. Probably most of the points tick the box for us as well. Especially for Wholesome and APAC, when we started our journey for cloud, and we just finished it last year, in terms of moving our entire data center to AWS cloud. The most important thing where we put up effort on was the business case. I think it starts with that when we talk about transparency and the cost control, because that is the benchmark what you will work with your business to achieve a cloud business case over a period of certain years going forward. And to do that, obviously, there are technological tools like we talked about cost monitoring and analyzing. We talked about tagging. We talked about regular cost optimization, working with your partners. But I think the most important thing is taking your business along on this journey, because the most important is moving from data center to cloud itself is a huge change for business. Their mindset change to cloud first strategy is the most important thing to have that transparency, because for them in the past, anything and everything that gets added to data center is not an OPEX cost that's going to be billed to them. Now, when you start showing them the cost they are getting because of the tagging and everything else, what you're doing to them, there's always an eyebrow raise to say, is this the best model to go on? But that is a journey that you take them as part of your periodic reviews, as Vinod mentioned about. You need to make sure that you have a proper FinOps model adopted into your organization with best practices. And you also have the cross-functional team involved in it. This is not an INO function anymore. This is not an infrastructure talk anymore. This is about having the functional teams involved with you, your businesses involved with you to understand where the cost is going with compared to the budget that they've approved. And then if there are cost anomalies, basically you identify the root cause and make sure they are not repeated. So I would say, in order to build that transparency, the cross-functional, the team collaboration is a key, in addition to all the technological or the tool sets what we implement to maintain our cost down. So definitely wherever there is a space to reduce our usages for the cloud, we make sure we switch on and switch off. This is like you're going out of your room and switching off your electricity bill. That's how it's as simple as that. But it becomes much more complex as you add many more organizations and many more layers to it along with your cloud partners.
Perfect. Thank you, Vinod, Gary, Vijay. We will continue on the same line and ask this important question on FinOps, which is one of the pillars of cloud optimization. How do you foresee the role of FinOps evolving in the next 5 years in relation to, say, cloud cost management? Gaurav, would you like to take a run at it?
Hi, Vaishnavi. Thank you for having me here. I'm happy to answer on the FinOps. Right. So let me start from the strategy perspective first. Like almost every organization now moves into cloud, and if I look at my budgets, typically anywhere between 15% to 25% is the budget for cloud for an organization who's fully on cloud per se. Now that's the importance that we're talking about, and hence FinOps. Now FinOps, what it helps us is in multiple fashions. So it starts from monitoring. If you have the right monitoring in place, if you have the right tagging and labeling in place, you will at least have a control of what's happening in the environment. So Vijay talked about apportioning the cost and telling the cost to the people. Only if you have such a decent FinOps tool in place, you will be able to monitor that. And once you're able to monitor, you'll be able to allocate it to those people. And that's very, very important. See, because when you move into cloud, you no longer have to raise the capex and take approvals and take 3 months time to procure servers, right? Anybody can just pop up with the requirement and say, I want a server tomorrow. And IT team, before you like it or not, will have to give it in a day's time. So the pain of budget approval is no longer there, and hence the visibility becomes very, very important. Not only that, so that's the first part of it. It's also very, very important in today's age and world that my payloads are running on cloud, right? I would have done some application profiling or the payload profiling to start migration over here. I would have also taken decisions based on which cloud to go, because every cloud would have its pro and cons. Somebody would be compute cheap, somebody would be storage cheap and stuff like that, right?
Yes.
But even then, you will see spikes. If you're monitoring a cloud spend in a month's time, there could be shocks. And we have seen that even in a week's time, you will see shocks. An application which was not supposed to run at a particular capacity runs at that capacity for 4 days in a month, and your budgets are screwed up. Now, that's how important now FinOps becomes. Another thing that I would like to point out is once you're able to have that control using a FinOps kind of a platform or a service, you will have control on exceptions also. And those are highlighted in time. And when they're highlighted in time, you can also take actions in time. Now, today's world, FinOps actually allows you even to take mitigating actions and automating them as well. But typically, this is where the financial things come into picture. And as rightly said, everybody is a part of that. Not only IT team, but also each and every function. If I want to know if a particular payload is supposed to run at a high capacity because of bubble capacity required at month end, I need to know that. I need to do that seasonality into my budgeting. I need to know what resources are required, and also when to switch off those resources. So that's what the important role that FinOps plays into this cloud environment. And I can keep talking about it, but I think that's what I want to say.
No, but as you were giving your insights, I could see the panelists also agreeing with you, because everyone more or less faces the same kind of challenges.
Absolutely.
And it is a challenge nonetheless. And that's where FinOps steps in. Thank you, Gaurav. Harshad, what's your take on it?
First of all, thank you for having me here. So FinOps, so we have a very detailed FinOps practice already built into HDFC Life. So, so FinOps not only helping us basically to cut our costs, but to do a right decision making about which workload is the right candidate for which cloud. So basically, because if you are tied up only with one cloud, then that is the default place to be for all your workloads. Here in HDFC Life, we think very differently to this. We have separate cloud providers, and basically our the movement or the migration completely depends on what is the nature of an application that we want to move to. So when I'm speaking about FinOps, FinOps comes slightly differently. Before FinOps, when the migration happens or when you move a workload to cloud, the first and foremost thing is whether it is rightly sized. So that is something that the architects and the architecture team. So we have something called as an architecture review board that basically decides about whether the application is really a candidate to move to cloud or not. Because not all applications have to move to cloud. That is something that we believe very strongly on. So once we have decided that yes, this is the candidate that we want to move to cloud, then later, of course, what the other panelists mentioned about the tagging and so on and so forth. Now, one very important aspect to all this is to have a common FinOps tool which works across clouds. Because it may be so that some of the components that you have kept in one cloud provider and some of the components you might decide to keep in some other cloud provider. Now, when you are doing a recon for when your bill comes, this is where you have to do a lot of manual things with your CSV files and Excel files. Here in HDFC Live, we have a common FinOps tool which basically gathers all that data and creates the beautiful dashboards for us to take a decision making. So FinOps is not just the FinOps team that is responsible, but the tools and the processes that get embedded for the FinOps to work successfully.
And there's a common dashboard which can be viewed by everybody, am I right?
Absolutely. So the dashboards need to have different type of visibility. The senior most management need to know about the overall TCO and so on and so forth. The teams which are actually working on the ground, they need to know the daily, daily spends or something like that. So the dashboards should be completely customizable.
customizable, and that eventually helps decision making for you.
Absolutely.
That becomes your important point. Thank you, Harshad. Rajesh, how do you foresee the role of FinOps?
Thank you. I think all valid points which are given and coming from experienced people who've been using cloud.
Absolutely.
And as Harshad was talking about, more and more organizations will have a multi-cloud strategy. If not more, minimum 2 clouds is something which would come in. The way it used to be in data centers. You always had 2 technology vendors to keep both of them honest, both from a technology perspective as well as from a costing perspective also. And your challenge on the FinOps side becomes greater when you have 2 different portals, 2 different dashboards coming in. So how do you make that into account basically? And as Harshad highlighted, what is most important is to have common tool, people who would understand that. And one of the points which I wanted to highlight over and above Harshad stated is that the dashboards need to be based on the role that you are doing. I think he did dwell into that, but it is a role-based access and a role-based dashboard. One of the other important thing, which is also important from a tool or a platform perspective, is that it should also give based on the historical consumptions that you've had. And if you have certain peaks which are coming during a period of time within a month or a quarter, it should give you a predictive model also that in such a time, based on your historical utilization, this is something which you may get. That would help the CIOs to have the right discussion with CFOs, because no CFO would give you an infinite budgets. And that's where FinOps become very important. So it's all about people, processes, and the technology, which is the platform which Harshad was talking about, which in totality gives you the overall thing. One of the important things which is important from a platform perspective is to have a standardized policy creation for various workloads, and also making sure that it looks at if there are any aberrations which are coming on that policy, it reports to the right set of people so that a corrective action can be taken. Not all processes you would want to automate, because there could be genuine requirement also. So there are workflows which may need to be created to make sure that the right authorization is given and people get the flexibility of what they want from cloud, however, are also complying to the policy or the definition that you have defined as part of the FinOps operations.
Correct. Though that the hour, as Harshad and Rajesh both mentioned, not all applications need to move to cloud. So, and as you said, not everything that moves to cloud needs to be automated as well. There are certain workloads which need a manual oversight. But the FinOps tool remains as a common denominator across applications. Perfect. Now, taking this a step ahead, Vijay, what strategies have proven most effective in aligning cloud spending with business priorities and also with your growth objectives?
Vaishnavi, this starts right at the offset of planning for next year, right? It's not something that comes ad hoc. I mean, there will be ad hoc requests, as everybody said, and we have to fulfill that. But when we say aligning with the cloud spending and business priorities, we start with the business priorities where we have vision for next 1 to 3 years. In terms of, what are the global projects we are talking about? If you're talking about looking at some ERPs, whether we're talking about in some markets, some acquisitions where obviously we'll have to get some of the, organizations into our cloud infrastructures and so on and so forth. We need to have a clear budgeting and a forecasting process of cloud spend that's going to come in next couple of years. That comes with the stakeholder collaboration, right? That comes with the stakeholder collaboration, right? From business, finances, the CFOs, the operations and the INO team, which makes it clear to the business in terms of how are we aligning our cloud spend to the business priorities and the growth, right? And so you can link it to that. This becomes an easy sell to the business rather than looking at cloud as a separate cost, which is coming as an aftermath of the business strategies. Now, we also look at we do a proper review and audits on these things once the business and the budget and the forecast has been signed off, and what are the actuals happening around that. We do the performance of matrix alignment, where the KPIs have been sent to the business outcomes, when the acquisitions are going to happen and what's going to be there. And especially around that, I mean, we talked about FinOps a lot, so I won't repeat all of that, what others have said, but the governance policies around cloud resource usages and the cost of management is key. Again, goes back to the same point of transparency and the cloud cost control, where business is onboarded with you on continuous optimizations to avoid any wastage and maximize the value for them. So it starts from your business priorities and strategy, going down to your IT strategy and priorities, and then going down to your cloud. And that's how you align your cloud strategies. And we've been following that very well within Holcim as well.
Understood. Vinod, I would like to hear your take also on this. What strategies are proven most effective in aligning cloud spending with business priorities?
Right. So I think what Vijay said is absolutely true from an annual planning exercise. But let me just say that from a ground principle, the value of cloud is in two areas, basically, where you have high variability in your workloads. So you have unequal utilization. The minute you reach a point where you have consistent utilization at whatever suggested limits are there for compute and storage, then you're largely indifferent now. In fact, now you have an incentive to move away or repatriate, which I think we're seeing signs of in the market as well. So one of our guiding principles has always been variability of load or balancing of load. If you translate that back to business growth strategies, that is starting up of new divisions, that is a true burst case where you have a business that is coming up, or one-off events, Christmas sales, New Year sales, whatever, big billion days, whatever it is that you're thinking about. So there are only two real cases in that sense from a business point of view that we consider. A third aspect is how do you balance your workloads? Now, as a global company with workloads operating in different time zones, you have some level of flexibility to say, can you balance? And now when you can balance, of course, cloud is the only option, because otherwise, locating in one or the other data center creates an imbalance from an end user experience perspective. So to my mind, these are the only two valid business scenarios where you have that. And what you need to do as part of the monitoring is to say, at what point is my workload leveling off to the point where I'm indifferent between cloud and data center related on-premise or close to customer kind of cloud offerings. And at that point, you really have to see whether you are in the mood for capex investment to go ahead and shift and maybe repatriate the workload. So I think that the focus is really on what is variable, what is eligible for cloud, to the context in which we started this question, which is not everything needs cloud, not everything deserves cloud. I think that is really the framework you need to have, which is say at what point does this workload that was a cloud workload, that was a valid cloud workload, stop being one. And if you don't have that governance, then you end up, racking up the.
So Vinod, who are the stakeholders to make this decision?
So largely, I think, look, the stakeholder to provide this information, to do this analysis is clearly IT, ideally a FinOps team if you can afford one, or your IT governance teams are the providers of this input. But obviously, then the business comes back and says, no, there is still growth left in this idea, or no, we're leveling off, or no, this is 2 years, we'll operate at this level. So I think it's an iterative process, but largely I think the signals need to come from your governance process, from our governance process, saying this is happening, load is leveling off. Is this time to say that this is stabilized, yes or no? If you don't ask that question, nobody's going to come and tell you that we've reached this point.
So the final step is a proactive communication with the business.
Right. And understanding your loads primarily is to say that when you see that leveling off happen, when you see that plateau happen, I think it's always a fair question to ask to say, have we reached steady state? Is this a point where this workload achieves, stability?
Noted on that part. Gary, how can organizations effectively monitor and manage the performance of cloud infra? And this is to ensure optimal service delivery. What's your take on it?
See, the companies can monitor and manage. There are few things which you can do that. There are tools are available, monitoring tools are available to track the performance metrics in real time. And most of these hyperscalers have this kind of tools are available. and set up the like performance KPI, right? What you want to track. For example, you can track like response time, uptime, like throughput to measure the cloud performance. And there are also features like auto scaling and load balancing, which can dynamically adjust like resource based on the demands on that. And as I said, the earlier question, you can also set up like proactive alerts to identify and address the issues like before they impact your service delivery. And like one of the points which we discussed earlier also, like perform regular audit, like performance audit, to ensure that infrastructure is optimized and running effectively. Right now, there's like most of our workload, not everything, it is on the cloud, right? And also training and the awareness, because this area it is changing so fast. It is very important to train the core team. What is the best practices going on in the area of the cloud performance management. And now because the AI ML is very available on that easily, we can use the data and you can predict and like resolve the what are potential performance of the bottleneck if it's coming in the future. I think these are the few things which we can use it, or steps we can use it to monitor and manage the overall performance of the cloud services.
Noted, Gary. Gaurav, I would like to hear your insights on this. How can organizations effectively manage and monitor the performance of cloud infra for optimal service delivery?
Right. So when we talk about cloud and we talk about performance, I would like to link another thing into that is the availability per se. When we look at the cloud, so what does impact availability and performance? Essentially, if I look at performance from a functional perspective, what does the expectation is? Are we meeting that expectation or not? Now, the expectation is a sub-millisecond response, and then that's the performance that you want to meet. If the expectation is a per second response, that's the what you want to meet. So it's basically a collaboration, as I understand, working with the business owners, understanding what the expectations from their side is, and then aligning it to the systems. That's what I call the performance, because ultimately, as leaders into IT functions, we are serving them for the performances of the business. So that's one thing that I would want to talk about performance. I think we talked about tools and stuff. There are multiple and many and more tools. I mean, talk about CloudWatch and various tools for the cloud partners. There are third-party tools available. You can take it from the shelf and just deploy it and then give you very fancy matrices around that from perspective of that. Another important thing, essentially, I would want to talk about is how do you actually make sure that you are meeting the performance requirements from the business using various capabilities which clouds bring inherently. Like, for example, if you want to scale up at a particular time, right, based on a particular threshold, you can configure that into a cloud platforms as to if you reach particular threshold, you kind of scale down horizontally, and then have more instances are popped down. You also talk about availability. Now, cloud, because it runs 24/7 for critical application, you have to have tools in place who are constantly monitoring and looking for alerts. And if possible, taking actions on top of it. So that if you want to say, for example, your app server kind of chokes down, you want to restart that. You don't want to wait for a person to come to office and then do a restart. You have tools available today which can detect that and then take an action or spawn up another service for you. So those automations become very important because performance and availability go hand in hand, and it is very important that the person dependency is reduced to as much as possible, be it FinOps as a tool, be it availability and performance as a tool. The tool dependency important for us now going ahead. And probably the last one is what we talk about is the compliance piece of it. You can have everything configured absolutely rightly, but if suppose there's an incident happens with the cloud and you have not put the right policies in place, you haven't put the right security tools in place, you're still in soup, right? So having the right security tools in place, having the right access, having the right methodology and periodic audits of your environment is very, very important.
I like the point about there being a predictive analytics to not ensure any kind of failure and it being the seamless and robust infrastructure that everyone looks forward to. That in turn affects the growth. Perfect, Gaurav. That takes us back to what Rajesh also had said. Now technologies like AI will come in and help us detect these failures much earlier, or help us say where your spikes are in terms of costs. Thank you so much, Gaurav. Rajesh, what's your take on it? How can organizations effectively manage and monitor?
I think most of the points are covered from that sense, but I think I'll pick on what Vinod was talking about. Cloud is all about taking care of those seasonalities that you may have from a workload perspective. But majority of workloads that you look at become stable over a period of time. a right way to look at from a FinOps perspective is there are methods available on hyperscalers or even on other cloud environments where you can move from a pay-per-use model to a reserved instance. Now this has become a stable environment. That it is going to run for a certain period of time at that stable node. You may want to commit for a period and get better financial benefits from those cloud providers. So that's one thing which people do look at, and that helps in managing the costs well. Now, these could be a year-long commitment or a 3 years long commitment, depending on the application workload that you have. That is one area I believe is something which is important. And the FinOps tools that are available or the platforms which are available today give you that information also, that such and such workloads which are constituting these infrastructure or the platforms that you are using from a cloud infrastructure have reached a certain threshold where it has plateaued. It may make sense for you to look at taking them to a reserved instance and thus getting the benefits from a financial operations perspective. That's an area that you could possibly look at. I think Gaurav did touch upon from a performance perspective. Performance is related to the performance, which is the end user expectation, what they would want. One of the areas that you need to take care of, or which becomes a challenge for most of us when we are managing these environments, are bill shocks, which are related to certain variable billing elements which are there. And I'm giving you some examples. Some of the cloud providers do talk about IOs, disk IO. None of the tools are available today who tell you for committing a specific application transaction, you would need as many number of these. These come as a bill shock to you at a later point in time. So that's where I think I will go back to what Vinod was talking or Harshad was talking, that at some point in time, it may make sense for you to look at alternates over and above the hyperscalers that you have. And that's where possibly look at some workloads to be migrated to a private cloud kind of environment. So these are some of the things which people are looking at. Over and above that, as AI is becoming pervasive, things are getting IoT enabled. There are certain performance requirements which would need similar technologies to be available where the data is getting generated from the IoT sensors so that you can get benefits. So how do you create a continuum from your cloud to edge, but have a FinOps tool, which is, or the monitoring, which is across those environments? I think those are things which are going to become important in times to come from a overall performance utilization and FinOps perspective.
Thank you, Rajesh. Harshad, my question to you would be, how can companies now mitigate the risks of data breaches in their cloud environments? And this has to come along with balancing cost savings also. So what's the way to go about it?
So I have twofold answer to this. The data breaches, I personally have a strong belief that recently we have seen a lot of data breaches, and a lot of cloud providers have been, their names have been tossed left, right, and center. What I believe, or as an organization, we believe that without a strong cloud infosec policy, these things are bound to happen. Till the time the organization actually takes charge and creates a strong cloud governance and cloud infosec policies, we really cannot stop them, because it's a wild west out there. Yeah. So first thing and foremost thing that what we have done in our organization is to create a cloud-centric infosec and cloud-centric governance policies. And as and when there are threats, and there are going to be threats, there have been threats, and there will be threats in the future, we just have to follow what is there in the policy. So this basically eradicates the decision-making and the thought process when the actual event occurs. You already have a cloud policy at an organization level. That is a strategy. And then at a tactic level, you have all your standard operating procedures to accommodate your cloud policy at a various departmental levels. So as and when the threat occurs, you just have to go back to your governance and the policy, whatever is written there, and then follow the standard operating procedures. That basically gives you enough peace of mind when the event actually happens. That is first phase. Second, there are a lot of preventive things that you can do. One thing is the policy part, and second is execution part. You should have these kind of discussions with your cloud service provider on time-to-time basis. Apart from that, if at all, if the budget permits, you should have some sort of a red team exercises from engaging with the external InfoSec partner or a vendor, and get those checked from time to time so that you are never caught off guard. This is basically helping you reduce your surface area. That is what I have to submit.
Prepare for every kind of scenario beforehand. The red team exercises is really picking up across organization.
Yep.
And as we see a lot of geopolitical disturbances as well.
Exactly.
That landscape is really dynamic at this point. So that's a good point. Rajesh, what's your take on it? How can companies mitigate the risk of data breaches, all while balancing cost savings?
I think Harshad touched upon having a right InfoSec policy is very important.
Yes.
And making sure that you have platforms or tools which help you to enforce those InfoSec policies wherever possible. With the means that you have. I think that is very important. And some of the platforms have that SecOps capability, which supports multi-cloud environment, or even extending it to non-cloud environments also, so that becomes a platform for you to create your InfoSec policies, enforce those, deploy those InfoSec policies, enforce that in case there is a breach. How do you make sure that you fill that gap as soon as possible with the right people, processes, authorized people with processes, to make sure that that is taken care of? I think that is very important. And that is something which comes from the platform, people and processes who are going to support that thing. This ensures that you do not have costs which are going to come in case you have a problem. One area of importance which people have to take care of is cloud providers have huge amount of security frameworks that they have created, but those are at platform level. And that's where a shared responsibility comes in. If you are a consumer of a cloud environment, whatever solution that you are deploying on top of that platform, you have to make sure that the security controls are deployed and monitored for your solution, which is over and above that platform. I think that is very important. If you have created that, you will be taken care of to larger extent. But as Harshad was calling out, these are ever evolving threats. You will also have to look at things which are going to evolve, and then evolve your platform also to support all those kind of capabilities.
Accordingly. Yes. Thank you, Rajesh. Vijay, how do you measure the success of cloud optimization efforts and across operations, cost, and say security as well?
Well, I think security aspects have been talked about just now in terms of how do we do it, because it was rightly said by Rajesh as well that it's not just at the platform level, it's also about the applications, the solutions you're implementing. So we have to ensure that we are doing all your VAPTs and the security checks for all the solutions and applications. I think one more important thing I would like to add in the security part is about the human aspect of it, right? So because as we all say, in security, we are safe until we are hit. And that's how the policy we are following in our organization as well, that to make sure that the proper training and the employee engagement and the third-party engagement is ensured that they are aware of everything that a company policy is required to follow. Because if not all, most of the events that happens in the security area, there is a human element involved in that, in terms of a security breach or a data breach that happens. With that, I think what we need to include is the compliance statuses, the audit findings. The incident response time is very important, so that the business doesn't go down for a longer time. And we are making sure our vulnerability detection rates or the tools what we are using are very much up there. Especially in terms of operations, if you talk about the operations include your performance metrics. Basically, I think Gaurav talked about it, about latency, throughput times, how well we are having your availability and uptime. What are the error rates that's happening around it? And then comes the resource utilization, your CPU utilization, your memory utilization. How best are you using it for your organization? Where does that plateau come into picture in terms of your memories and storages? And then the scalability part of it. How can you scale up and scale down effectively for your organizations to manage the business demand in terms of whether it's load balancing distributed over your resources or any new business that you want to spin off on that. And now both of this, whether you talk about operations or security, have an impact on cost. How do we measure cost? Basically is about you looking at, how is our cost going per transactions or operations, going first into the markets and the demand that is coming in. Then you look at the overall total cost of ownership of cloud infrastructure, and then softwares and the labor and the efforts that are going behind. And then how do you do cost avoidances? By avoiding unnecessary expenditure behind cloud, by avoiding certain kind of, job done on it. But then it goes back to the basic principles of your budget spends and forecasting accuracies. And then comes the cost optimization part where what are your committed uses, discount in terms of reserve instances we talked about. We talked about decommissioning of what are the idle resources we have. You're doing all of that because we've just gone live last year. So we're not at that plateau of saying, everything has been streamlined yet. But what we are finding out is a lot of opportunities of getting cost optimization within the organization by working these cross-functional team efforts. And we are coming towards, that business case valuation, which is at the right size for the organization. So I think keeping your business closely abreast about all of this, whether it is cost, whether it is operations and security efforts, brings you as much as closer to the success story of your cloud journey.
Noted, Vijay. Gaurav, you wanted to add a point to this.
Yes, so very lightly said, Vijay. So while not doing a lot of stuff and extra workloads running costs you cost, even not doing sometimes in cloud environment also actually incurs cost.
Right.
Imagine into a cloud environment, you have an instance running for 5 years or 3 years. You would be surprised to know that today, if you take the same configuration with a newer cloud model, it will be cheaper. If we don't do a purging and stuff on the storage, the data just sitting on the application which continues to run, it will keep eating up your cost. By the way, in a cloud cost, your storage cost is a substantial chunk. So your cloud strategy on which version, what IOPS storage you want to use, which apps to run on which kind of storage also makes a very big difference. Just want to add that.
Absolutely agree. That's where my cost avoidance point was, where unnecessary expenditure does not be required, but archiving is a good piece for us.
You have to be on your toes when you're actually working with cloud. Yeah.
True that. That's where the point of proactive periodic audits come into place. Yes, and proactive communication. Harshad, how do you measure the success of your cloud optimization efforts across operations, cost, and security?
So we here in SDFC, we have something called as a DevOps plus / SRE team. So who are dedicatedly tasked, so optimization of cost is an ongoing activity, as all the panelists agree. And we dedicatedly have a team basically who are engaged day in, day out for checking any wastage. Apart from that, we also have support from the cloud service providers, wherein there is something called as a dedicated TAM. With all cloud service providers, this is a de facto way of working now. So what we have done, especially with our company or our organization, is we have also taken their help because they get a visibility to maybe 3 or 4 different large clientele, and maybe there could be some additional improvement area that we might miss. But in that case, it is up to them to come back and have that guiding hat coming to us and basically help us optimize on the areas which we have missed in the first place. So it's a collaborative effort between us and them, and that is how we have been able to maintain and manage costs. That is for especially all the workloads that are going into cloud. Now, second part to this, I will also take few more minutes of your time to elaborate on the optimization of cost. So what we feel is whenever we are moving a workload to cloud, we are not moving it as is. We are always in the thinking of how we can architect this application to make it cloud native or cloud ready. Because if we are going to move it as is, we are not going to derive any cost benefit out of this overall thing. So before a candidate or before an application moving to cloud, we do spend that engineering effort and engineering time to make that application cloud ready first, only then we take it to cloud. So that saves lot of our time and lot of our effort and lot of our money over a period of when it gets extrapolated over a period of maybe 3 to 5 years.
Noted. Thank you, Harshad. Vinod, I would like to talk to you about the collaboration that comes in now across teams. So definitely cloud optimization the efforts go beyond IT teams. You have to involve business users, operation teams, finance, marketing, everyone. How do you ensure effective collaboration between these teams? And what are some of the challenges that you would have to navigate also?
This is probably the trickiest question so far, from the sense of look, I mean, we love cross-functional teams. I think the idea of cross-functional teams to solve problems is brilliant. But having said that, one of the challenges with these is the lack of defined ownership for cost. So typically, it is all very well to have a large team that is working on a project, but it's like you're in a taxi and the bill is climbing and you're the one who has to pay for it. So I think it's a very fine line on how you manage that. I'll give you two places where this happens a lot. One is UAT. Large project was spun off a test environment exclusively against a complex project, and there's about 10 different people who have to test functionality, and another 10 different people who have to test continuity in operations. And typically these things don't happen to a calendar. I'm busy, it's month end, so my finance guys are not available. It is peak shipping time, so my supply chain is not available. And it's a very tricky point when you try to enforce a calendar against these, especially if you find an issue and then you are investigating this issue in real time. There's a huge challenge because the bill is continuing, the meter is continuing to run, and you are responsible for it. What has always worked for me is two things. One is, I think, absolute clarity, which is say that identify the situation, identify what is happening, and throw it to the team. Because, for instance, I know a lot of people who will archive that instance and say, we'll bring it back when you're ready. Guess what? It doesn't work so simply because the day that the person is ready, you won't be able to spin it up again at the same level, and different stakeholders will be ready at different times. So, one thing that I think works very effectively is when you are able to confront, and I don't mean in a negative way, but in a positive way, to say, look, this is where the meter is. As part of your updates, this is my cloud spend I'm incurring on this particular project. I think awareness is half the problem. When it comes to collaboration. The other piece is really, that oftentimes we are eager, as IT to participate in this thing. So we will spin up ahead of requirement. We will hold much later thinking, acha, or kya ho sakta hai, what else is possible? Should I ensure against continuity? And I think, there is need for clarity in decision making, which is said, this is the point at which I really need this, and this is the point beyond which I can reasonably expect it not to need it. And be transparent with the teams to say, okay, this is your mission, and this is the point at which your group is dissolved. So the instance is gone. And I think that is really the key, is how do you do this in a way that it doesn't offend, in a way that it doesn't restrict? Because the first thing that a business cross-functional team will do if you enforce anything is to come back and say that you are causing the goal to fail. And some of the problems that cross-functional teams tackle are very vital to your business. So you have to err on the side of gentleness and explaining and transparency. But I think eventually you have to have very clear-cut policies which say this is the time in which we'll pull the plug. And sometimes it's a good idea to pull the plug on the overall projects also if they don't go towards the conclusion. Sometimes cross-functional teams just stay permanently around some of the core problems for your business. And over years, I think I've learned to tell the difference between those that are solvable and those that are not. So I think it's a matter of, I think, hyper clarity and hyper awareness to say this is what is happening and this is how we'll deal.
I think Harshad and Rajiv agree with your point as well. Some projects are not, they don't have the clarity. Okay. Gaurav, what's your take on it? How do you ensure effective collaboration between cross-functional teams?
See, as I look at it, I believe collaboration is a complete life cycle process. I mean, even before you put the first application on cloud, you have to be very, very clear why you want to go on cloud. I mean, cloud could be a FOMO. Fine. Everybody wants to go on cloud. Let's put everything on cloud. Easiest thing a lot of organizations do that. Having said that, it's very important that we collaborate with business teams and identify first, do we really want to go on cloud? If so, which application? So the application profiling becomes very, very important. And profiling, important that we understand from the business user as to what is the characteristics of that application, what is the requirement from availability and performance for the applications, when do they want to use it and stuff, what performance is required. What time do we want to run those applications? So all those important questions have to come with the collaboration. Second, once you have that matrix is ready, you have to collaborate with the leadership on from a commercial perspective as to what is the cost that you want to incur. Everybody wants to go on cloud from a cost and flexibility perspective is what I presume. From my experience of last about 5 years playing around with various clouds, a lot of times it doesn't happen that easy. First year, you put everything on cloud, your infrastructure cost goes multifold. And then you wake up and realize that what's the cost importance and FinOps and stuff come into picture, and then you start taking action upon it. So collaboration there, what to run, where to run. I mean, for example, one particular application can be run on any cloud, could be on a big threes, could be some of the smaller cloud vendors also. But it's very important you understand what's the characteristics and behaviors of that application, and then decide which cloud to move to. What kind of instance can you run? So the kind of storage you take. I mean, it's getting into granularities, but all these decisions cannot be done by an IT or a technology team. They have to have in collaboration with business users, and they have to have buy-in. Then only when you actually get into the operations part of it, you'll be able to take decisions with them as to when do I shut it off? Should I run on a lower IO storage or not? What kind of backups do I take? And trust me, application is one part. Backups take up a lot of cost on cloud. I mean, all these things are very, very practical issues that people face. And just coming from that, collaboration becomes very important. You can't take a decision. The easy part is you can take a decision and action very quickly on cloud, but it can have repercussions. So you have to be very much in line with your business. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Gaurav. With this, we come to the end of the discussion, but the audience have a few questions. So we'll take a couple. We have some time. We'll take a couple and let me know who wants to go ahead and answer this. So there's a question from Abhilash which says how to control the cloud costs comprising of container services, say like Kubernetes and etc., which is used by development team who need on-the-fly approval without too much process involved. Harshad, you have a dev team, right? So why don't you take this up? Yeah.
Sure. So this answer specifically to Amazon. I would answer this specifically with Amazon Cloud. So some development environment that we have in Amazon for EKS cluster and especially the EKS node groups, you have within Amazon, you have an option to have spot instances to replace your node group. Now, what happens is when you compare spot prices with the regular on-demand prices, there is approximately 40 to 50% discount that you receive upfront. Okay. Very few companies are doing it right now, but those who are doing it, deriving a huge benefit out of it. And at the end of the day, the development environment, if at all, if there is a spot node gets removed from the real life cluster, since it's a dev environment, nobody is actually feeling the pinch of it. So even if the cluster collapses or cluster scales down, since it's a dev environment, there is hardly any data loss or hardly any business impact at all. So this is how we are handling it, that for all the Kubernetes environment, within the auto scaling group, you have a function of introducing spot instances. You can create a ratio about whether you would like to have 50-50, 50% on demand and 50% spot instances, or you would also like to have something like 75-25. It's up to the DevOps and the SRE team to decide. But I strongly urge the person who has asked this question to use this and probably get back with the feedback.
Perfect. So Devashish, that's your answer. So one more question we will take in. How do you see FinOps fit in with the new data bill coming into place? Rajesh, do you want to take a run at this?
Yeah, I think data bill is more to do with the data privacy, data residency requirement, and also from a sovereignty perspective, whether the cloud provider that you are taking is complying to the law of the land itself, 100% or not. I think DPDP, what it is talking about is that data has to be in country, which most of the cloud providers have today nodes.
Yes.
Where the concern comes in from DPDP perspective is the metadata that you have on some of the hyperscalers, which is to monitor and manage, is something which goes out because they manage it centrally from a specific location. But I think they are coming out with solutions where they are saying that they would have a way where they can create a environment where they will assure that the data will not move out. However, they are still governed by Patriot Act of US. So if they are asked for certain things, I think that's where what is important is to look at your data classification, which is the data which you would want to be fully secure, may not put it on a public cloud environment, which comes under that Patriot Act. And that classification, I believe, is where Gaurav was alluding towards that CFT, which is the business owners, the CISO within the organization, and the IT teams have to look at and decide what comes under DPDP and which needs to be taken care of from all the three angles, which is data residency, metadata residency, and also looking at the law of land, 100% being overriding thing for it to be managed. I think in some of the regulatory industries, those are important for certain workloads, and that needs to be taken care of. And that's where I think a lot of people are talking about multi-cloud deployments, some workloads on hyperscaler, some workloads to be deployed on private clouds. That's how people are looking at it.
Thank you, Rajesh. And thank you, Vinod, for answering some of the questions on the back end as well. And thank you, Neha and Malika, for keeping a track of the audience questions and providing them with answers and resources. With this, we come to the end of the discussion. And what a discussion was it? All the panelists more or less agreed on most of the points. The strategies, we learned more about the strategies that are effective in aligning cloud spending, how organizations effectively monitor, a common FinOps tool for all of it. Are all applications necessary to go on cloud? And if they do, then how we need to automate? A manual oversight still needed at some point. We also learned how IT leaders mitigate the risk of data breaches. How do they balance cost savings while doing all of this? And finally, how do you measure the success of your cloud optimization efforts? But the common central theme that comes across is there needs to be a proactive monitoring and a proactive communication. If you can afford a team, form it, but there has to be a periodic check and audit. Otherwise, you will lose track of your cloud spending, and that will be detrimental to the growth. Thank you so much, leaders. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule on a Thursday afternoon. I really appreciate you coming in and giving us these insights. It was lovely having you on board, and it was really insightful to learn more from what you do at your organization. That will be more helpful for the audience as well. I really appreciate you taking time out, and thank you so much for joining us for this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes. To the audience, we have a feedback form which will be mailed to you. We are keen to hear your insights on the session and how did you like it and what we can do better to improve. I repeat, a feedback form will be mailed to you, and we would like your insights on how did you like this session and what more inputs you'd need. Thank you, Tatacom and ETSIO team, for facilitating the session. We'll take your leave. Have a good day and see you soon.
Thank you all.
Thank
Take
you.
care.